pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Just want to announce that Mayor Pontieri is not here tonight because he is in Colorado visiting his family, his son, Colorado, spending the holiday. We wish him a good holiday season. And thank you all for coming. Safety message, there's no smoking in the room, and you need to smoke, go outside, and if there is a fire, please exit out the back or the front and stay in the parking lot and wait until the emergency vehicles get here. Village Clerk?
Yes, hi, good evening. One approval tonight for the board meeting minutes of November 12th, 2013, please.
Motion? Second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Village Treasurer?
Good evening, everybody. Hope you all can hear me. I don't have a mic. We'll start with the bills. Bills for the period of November 15th through the 25th. Total $1,303,180.35. The five largest of those bills: New York State retirement, $850,528. That's our 2010 employer contribution. 2013. New York State Employees Health, $108,274.70 monthly premium. Jayco for parking meter footings, $51,950. H2M, Railroad Avenue sewer line replacement, $19,949.12. That's engineering study. J.R. Holzmacher, $13,045.90. EPA preparation. We are in the process of going through a EPA and DEC audit, so they did some work for us. They total $1,043,747.72. If I could have approval for those bills.
Motion to approve?
Motion.
Second? Second. All in favor? Aye.
I do have a couple of more items, nothing major. First one is a approval to loan from general fund to community development, $8,798.35. We will get paid back. That's for payroll. We could have approval of that.
Motion to approve?
Motion. Second.
All in favor?
You do have cash balances. That's for your information in front of you. But I would like approval. I think we need to do this. We have some equipment that we're going to be surplusing. Okay, we're going to be getting rid of it, old equipment, outdated. There's a list in front of you. Most of that equipment is from 2008 or before. On the computers themselves, we will be pulling the hard drives and making them obsolete, so you don't have to worry about any information that's stored. And I'd like approval to put those out to pasture.
Question for John?
What happens to those computers?
Well, we destroy them.
You destroy it.
We destroy the hard drive so that you can't get information off of it. You usually stick a nail through it and catch it. But, you know, we'll do what we have to do to make sure that no information can get out there, and the rest of it will be destroyed.
So you can't erase them?
No, you have to basically,
Can't erase them and give them to the
Frame
school?
well, I mean, you can take the hard drive out and then give what's left to the school, but then, you know, what do they have?
I mean, if they're old, you can recycle them. There's companies that
That's probably
take
what we're
them.
gonna do, yeah.
And
But I
then they
just want-
recycle the components.
But I want everybody to be assured that whatever is on there is gonna be off before we get rid of it, so we don't have to worry about it.
Just to answer your question, Tom, everything that's surplus is,
Dead.
Dead. It's really dead.
not even, the schools probably wouldn't even take it.
You see how much junk I have in my
I think it's gonna come back.
So we have a motion to approve surplus? Motion to approve?
motion.
Second? Second, trustee Devlin? All in favor?
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ron.
Yeah, I have a question for Ron.
Sure.
On the, it seems like we've been loaning CDA some money.
We always do.
Yeah. And what is the mechanism?
It's just a cycle where their payroll hits, so we have to give them the money and then they give it back to us when they get it. It always happens, and, you know, most, 99% of whatever we loan them is for their payroll.
Okay.
And as soon as they get their funds available, they pay us back. It's usually within a week or two.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay,
Okay,
any further
We have-
questions?
first of three public hearings. Notice is hereby given that a public hearing be held on Monday, November 25th, 14 Baker Street, Patchogue, New York, by the Village Board of the Incorporated Village of Patchogue to repeal Section 435-14.1, to end the moratorium in the D3 zone on applications to intensify use, convert unhabitable space, increase the footprint or square footage of existing buildings, or increase occupancy by proposed law, copy of which proposed law is on file at the office of the village clerk. At said public hearing, any person interested will be given the opportunity to be heard.
Okay, thank you very much. Attorney Egan, can you just give a brief idea of what this is
Yes,
all about?
this one is, this is housekeeping, but it starts the sequence of the following public hearing, and then ultimately the resolution, which is number 2, which I recommend that you have under 9A2, which is your resolution with your agenda, Deputy Mayor. But this specific public hearing tonight, this first one is just housekeeping. All this does is eliminate the moratorium because it's beyond its time frame. Time frame was 180 days, was approved by the Suffolk County Planning Commission, was originally enacted, and now it's beyond it.
Motion.
Second.
Any public to be heard on this, anyone would like to speak on this public hearing? Seeing none, a motion? Second.
Okay, moving on, notice is hereby given that a public hearing be held on Monday, November 25th, 14 Baker Street, Patchogue, New York, by the Village Board of the Incorporated Village of Patchogue to add Section 435-22 of Chapter 435 of Village Code to require off-street parking in the D3 Business District, a copy of which proposed local laws on file at the office of the village clerk. At said public hearing, any person interested will be given the opportunity to be heard.
Thank you. Attorney Egan.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Mayor. This is much more complicated, obviously, than the last public hearing, but what this seeks to do is make a change that has never existed before in the village of Patchogue in the D3 business district to require businesses in the D3 parking district to provide parking. Historically, that never happened because there were municipal parking lots that were potentially had excess capacity. Now, as we know, there is no excess capacity in the parking lots, and yet we have D3 properties that have no ability to provide parking. So the question is to stay stagnant and not make any change, or make the change and encourage growth, and how, as using planning tools, do you both encourage growth, but at the same time provide or anticipate that there will be an expansion of the parking to accommodate that growth, when in fact the property owners cannot find parking and yet want to continue the growth or expansion of their properties. I can say that certainly Trustee Devlin can chime in at any time. Trustee Devlin chaired the committee that Trustee Hilton was on, and Trustee Crean, to come up with this solution. It has met with Chamber of Commerce President, was on it, as well as restaurant owners who attended the committee meeting. And the proposal is that the proposal is that there will be a payment in lieu of parking space. That if a park, based upon your use, you will have to pay for a parking space, and that payment will be used by the village as a one-time fee, will be used by the village to go purchase additional parking spaces. Now, for instance, if you were going to install a retail or a professional use in a park, in your store, in your building, you would have no rental fee, no parking fee. To encourage retail and professional services, offices being in town, which are uses the Chamber of Commerce is certainly in favor of promoting additional retail uses, you would be exempt from the parking fee. However, if you were going to install any other use, a restaurant use, a bar use, some other use beyond retail and office space, you would be subject to the parking fee. You will be, in recognition of investments in buildings, you will be credited with the number of spaces you would normally get for a retail space against your total. So for instance, and I put an example in, I know it's very complicated, there are a lot of details, but I put an example in the trustees' packets. If you were going to install a retail store of 3,000 square feet, the parking code requires you to provide one space per 150 square feet. So that means that a retail store would be required to find 20 parking spaces. Under the proposed code, retail is exempt, so they would pay no fee. That's important though, because that sets the baseline for the parking credit for existing stores, existing buildings. So for instance, if a catering hall was going to go into that same 3,000 square feet, they would need to provide under the code 3 spaces per 100 square feet. Again, the parking calculations has been established in the code for a long time, and it's a separate chapter. At 3 spaces per 100, using the same example of a 3,000 square foot space, they would be required to find 90 parking spots. The payment in lieu of parking calculation would be 90 spots, less the 20 credit, the retail credit, would give you 70 parking spaces. And then 70 times X, whatever that fee amount the board's going to place, is going to be what that fee would be. Whether the fee is $1,000 or whatever that number is going to be. 70 times X, it equals the pile-up fee. Now a restaurant use, again, because the parking calculation changed based upon the use. In 3,000 square feet, a restaurant's required to find 1 space per 100 square feet. So you would have to come up with 30 spaces. 30 spaces, less the 20 for retail, the credit would be 10 spaces that you would have to pay for a parking space. That's the example. And the intention of the legislation is to have that parking space money specifically put into a parking fund so that the village can have the funds to go and acquire other parking spaces, areas for parking. And it's been testified to many, many times throughout the parking fee, the parking meter discussion, how expensive parking is. That to develop an individual parking space, it costs $13,000, and for a parking structure, it costs $30,000 per space. So this is, again, for the village's contribution is we'll recognize that if you were going to install retail, it's zero. To encourage retail use, the fee is zero. But anything beyond that, because there's going to be additional cars or additional heavier use, you'll have to pay a parking space fee. And so it does 2 things. It encourages retail use in the downtown, and it encourages growth and expansion of businesses, and it does it in a manageable way, a responsible way, that allows the village to go have the funds to go purchase additional parking.
Now, let me just, is this a common legislation on Long Island?
There are areas, towns that have it. The town of East Hampton has it. The town of Huntington has it, where they suspended their fee. The city of Glen Cove in 2011 adopted it. The village of Valley Stream has it, the village of Nyack has it, the village of Westbury has it. It's a common use, it's becoming a more common land use tool.
Now, if this fee didn't exist, the expansion of parking lots would be the responsibility of the residents of the village, correct?
Correct.
Taxpayers have to pay for it. Okay, thanks. Jerry, you have a question?
Thank you, Jim. The $13,000 per space, that doesn't include any sort of land acquisition cost. So what that number might be could be much higher than that. It all depends upon what the cost would be to acquire additional property. So
Yes.
it is a costly endeavor. It's something that when we initially started the debate about this, I was kind of teetering. I wasn't sure which way I wanted to really go with this, but it just seems like the village has outgrown the municipal lots that were put into effect by, Mayor Walpole a long, long time ago. And the uses have changed in a way in which, as Jack said, the only way for us to increase our parking would be either to levy a fee to the business owners or tax our residents. And for me, I would be much more inclined to levy a fee on the business owners that are profiting from this, the use of these municipal lots. So I want to thank Lori and Billy and the rest of the people that were on the committee. It's just one of the questions that I had that I wanted to just try and make clear, you know, there are specific examples. For example, like the Napa building, which is currently vacant land. If somebody comes there to build a retail store, whether it's another multi-level structure like the Burlington Coat Factory or just a single level, as long as it's the retail and office use, he will be exempt from this pilot calculation.
Correct.
Okay.
If that property owner was gonna install a gap on the first floor, a J. Crew, 0, because that's a retail use.
Right. So, taking on Jerry's example, suppose Napa property becomes a restaurant for training students on the first floor in the front, and the rest of it's dormitories. How's it work? Change of use, it's got no use now, it's a parking lot.
You would be subject to the parking calculations that would be required for a dormitory use and restaurant use.
Okay, so the D3 exemption for parking is gone.
Correct.
Okay.
Except for
Unless-
retail.
Except for retail.
But-
And there is an allowance in this
Correct.
formula.
You would get a credit, however, Napa would be adding all new square footage, and that is a nuance in the law. New construction, aside from retail or professional office, shall not be eligible for the credit. Meaning that if you were on if on the Napa spot, there was a restaurant that was built from the ground up, an Outback, was built from the ground up, that they would not be eligible for the credit for what that retail space would be.
So, let's just take, I mean, I've seen the plan for this building, I don't know what's gonna happen, but I think it's 5 stories tall. Right? Well, maybe there's a restaurant on the roof, I'm not sure. But there's definitely a restaurant in that building. And it's, how wide is that lot?
60 feet.
60 feet wide, good. And how deep?
Right.
So, am I doing it right? Is that 12,000? Did I do that, Richard? Good. So, that might be, I'm just guessing, okay, but let's just say it's 100, okay? That's just dropped 2 zeros. So that's 120 spaces they would be required to pay for
Yes,
under this new code. Okay.
yes. And that's actually a good example of what the problem was before. In D3, you could install a building, let's just say hypothetically, 5 stories or whatever the story may be, and provide,
0 parking. Right. Because when that regulation was put in place in the 90s, it was to attract people to come to in the 60s, okay. That it was designed to attract business to come to the village.
Like the,
Well, but I think also,
right, correct?
if I could just comment, when we look at a downtown, downtown is typically attached buildings with municipal parking. So it's really not possible for individual businesses to provide parking on a,
There's no
you know,
way.
on,
Right.
this is more like now we're asking to provide virtual parking because we'll take care of it. So I think that that's always been the struggle, is you certainly don't want to encourage people to start putting in spot little parking lots wherever they can. And so I think that's why in the 60s it seemed logical to not require.
So what about a place like Meet the Ball, okay, which is just opening, or Queen City Cupcake, which are both eateries, right? So they probably classified as restaurants. When they change hands,
Their uses haven't changed.
their
Right, your
use,
uses wouldn't
that
change.
was gonna be my question.
Okay.
Should we know?
Well,
ownership
Meatballs
change?
is a new restaurant.
Well,
Queen City would be.
Meatballs is not a new restaurant, it was a restaurant before.
Except expanded into the rest of the building next door.
Oh, it
They
did?
expanded,
Okay,
yeah.
all right.
The zoning board, under the law,
Yeah, I was
the
just gonna
proposed
point that
law, the zoning board has the ability to grant a special exception with regard to an existing building and authorize the expansion or alteration of such building without requiring additional parking upon a finding that such special exception is reasonably necessary to continuance of an existing use.
So,
Certain situations, the zoning board may find themselves in a calculation where it doesn't make a lot of sense to levy a fee on something that either had some kind of a minor change or something that would fit within that special exception. This is to a certain extent innovative because there are some villages that we looked at that had intense downtown uses, such as the village of Garden City and the village of Rockville Center, and they don't have any requirement. They simply leave it up to the planning board's discretion. And that becomes very difficult because when you leave a board, something up to a board's discretion to a certain extent, you never know where that line gets drawn. And that doesn't really allow a developer to look at what his bottom line is going to be and calculate in what his investment is going to be to invest in the community. When, until you go to the planning board, potentially it's too late. Here, you'll know up front that if we're going to do this, this is what it's gonna cost. That the parking is gonna be handled by the village, snow plowed by the village, done by the village. As trustee Devlin said, the virtual parking lot, you're paying for a virtual parking lot that the village is going to maintain. But by doing this, at least it will guarantee that there will be a plan for parking and the acquisition and development of parking lots for your new business.
so if the building just, the building's use stays the same, but the ownership changes, no consequence. If the ownership changes and it expands, right,
Expansion would
the
qualify.
formula applies to the entire property, including the expansion.
As long as it's not retail
Right.
or all.
As long as, well, right,
Yep.
okay. Okay.
So when you talk about use, the use changing, what if a building like, let's look at Jay's, it was retail and, well, whatever it would have been, it's been vacant for a long time. How far back do you go to say that the use is substantial?
Well, for the immediate.
Immediate, so if it's vacant, then it's immediately.
Right.
Okay.
And if Jay's went retail, then there's no.
Neutral.
It's
Yeah, that would
neutral.
be neutral.
But if it becomes a steakhouse.
Emporium Junior?
Yeah,
Please
right,
don't.
whatever, then this applies. I think, by the way, I didn't participate in the meeting, so I'm digesting this. I think this allowance, this credit, very fair. I mean, that respects what was done in the past, right? And, I mean,
And that was the intention.
I mean, it may not do it, it may overdo it, it may underdo it, I don't know, but it's respectful of, you know, you put your business here, we provide the parking for you.
Right.
And now we're a new village, so we need more. All right.
Well, haven't some municipalities gone so far as to sell the credits?
Can you give any examples in the village currently where somebody has expanded their footprint? And say, for instance, the Tapley, they've expanded their footprint,
The
you know,
Idiot.
outside, or the Idiot.
Yes.
They would be, if this law was in effect, they would be, they would have to pay that fee.
Yes. Yes. Those are actually two good examples because,
Patchogue.
right. Well, yep, but the Village Idiot's a good example because that took over a retail space. Retail space, you know, at any one time has much fewer people working behind the counter and in the store. It's much softer use on the parking lot. On restaurant use, you could potentially have a capacity that's, only limited by the fire code.
Well, let's say the Idiot put in 10 tables, I think there may be a little more than that, but 10 tables, 4 people at a table, so that's 40 additional people capacity in the restaurant, right? So now you've got good 20 more cars that need parking spaces. So multiply that, then you have the tap room, which is the same thing, and maybe it's the same number, so now you got 40 additional cars in the parking lot. Then you have Parabel maybe who wants rooftop dining, now it's another 80 additional cars. So, you know, once this catches on, we know in the village, once something good catches on, everybody seems to fall into line to take advantage of it. So it could mean that if a lot of the restaurants do this, you could be talking hundreds of parking spaces that
Don't exist.
don't exist.
To go back to the village again, they had a space under D3, didn't have to provide parking. If they did that addition now, these calculations would apply to the entire.
No, only to the enlargement, only to the portion that would require the additional
Okay.
parking.
All right.
So if you went for a building permit application or site plan approval, and you're expanding it by 3,000 square feet, you would get, 3,000 is the example that I used, one space per 100, you'd require 30 spaces.
And they would still get the credit for that additional space?
Yes.
What kind of obligation are we under to actually provide that? None. So, other than revenue, why are we doing it? I mean, it's not gonna ease the parking.
Well,
Well,
Billy, over time,
Ultimately.
presumably, it'll
Well,
accumulate
That's the
revenue,
intention.
Right.
which will enable us to get more land that we can put parking.
I mean, if I could comment, I think, you know, we looked at a village like East Hampton who instituted something like this and was unable to expand their parking because the cost of the properties is so extreme. We're not in that situation. If you look at the properties that surround our municipal parking, there's a lot of property that can be picked up inexpensively and at very low interest rates. So I think if this money combined with the money from the parking meters gives you a certain level of cash flow, you can seek to float a bond and have it, have it work out in such a circumstance that it really doesn't cost the village any money. I think that's what we're seeking to do.
And it's specifically in the law too, payment of the parking fee shall be added to a fund used to create municipal parking in and adjacent to the district.
Any other questions from the board?
How, to go along with what you were talking about, what does this look like potentially in terms of revenues? Is this, do we have 500 spaces? I mean, if
It's impossible to.
Yeah,
It's
you can't-
impossible because you have vacant
yeah,
properties
we have a lot of vacant spaces.
J's or even say Suffolk Sports Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
Who knows what those uses will be converted into and how much revenue they'll collect? It's unknown at this point in time.
Yeah, if say, for instance, Sports Hall of Fame turned into a Denny's or some kind of place like that, which could have, how many tables a Denny's has? They have more than 10 tables, that's for sure. The amount of
That's a
parking
big
spaces
space.
would be, and as you mentioned, Jay's, you've got 3 huge spaces there. If that turns into a buffet, you never know.
And how many years was Sweezy's closed?
Yeah.
And we grew complacent or comfortable with that parking lot back there because Sweezy's was closed.
Any other questions? Public? Mr. Furman?
Joel Furman, 10 South Ocean Avenue, and also 8 to 18 West Main Street, 2 buildings, the Constant Building and Furman Building. Number one, I want to ask a question to the board in view of your election to install parking meters on that southwest, as you address, I guess, the Church Street parking lot. Has a title search been ever executed on the part of the village?
Yes,
What did you find?
that it was, that all the properties originally from Daisy Furman on the line on that curve all the way back down to Union Savings Bank was either donated to the village or part of a condemnation proceeding.
Okay, I'm well aware of the fact that there was a condemnation proceeding. However, my knowledge, of course, I'm dating back to, when was that grant, 1958?
The 60s.
60s, okay, I was probably about 12 years old at that time. Not had an opportunity to review the deed, but from my understanding from my brother, he advises me that there's a covenant that that grant from Furman to the village. Do you know what that covenant reads?
Well, you can swing by my office and you'll see it, because we were looking for that, and
did
it's
you
not
find it?
there, it's not there.
There's no covenant?
No.
Well, it's my understanding that there is a covenant that runs through the land and states in effect that in the event that the village discontinued the use of that property expressly and solely for free municipal parking, that property would revert back to Furman. It's not there, huh?
No, the reason why it's not there is because they were in the condemnation proceeding, it actually had the lines of the map on what parcels were being condemned, and that was included in it. And the line along the north part where your curb is, you know where the curb is, you know where your fencing is? That curb line to the north of the turn-in off South Ocean, Furman Park, and the curb line that continues, that line south was part of the condemnation proceeding that was actually before Supreme Court.
Well, I think I still would take exception to that, in the fact that it's my understanding again, to not confirm, that property was given to the village prior to your eminent domain. So that being the case, I would suspect to say that the eminent domain would not be effective enough, would not affect that grant to the village. You can't do an eminent domain against yourself. So I would think that covenant would survive.
Well, there's a lot of fascinating stuff that went on back there on those things, and you should swing by the office sometime, I'll lay them all out for you, because that situation occurred over on the Terry Street parking lot, because there was an original grant, the property that owned, the people that owned it was called the Patchogue Development Corporation, who owned Burlington, then donated the parking lot that was parallel to Burlington on Terry Street back to the village. And in it, they actually put in a provision that said, if you're going, you can meter it, but if you meter it, you gotta meter everybody, not just us. And so when they did the condemnation, they did Terry Street on the east side, the east side, and then Terry Street on the west side, because they couldn't condemn that central portion because they already owned it. So that situation you're outlining did occur, they were cognizant of that over at Terry Street, but over on the Church Street parking lot, they did it all, including the piece that was south of your piece.
Well, I don't think it's relevant, because each one of those cases is different in its own. Well, I'm gonna look further into that. I'm not in agreement with what you just told me.
You know where to find me.
Yeah, we know where to find me too.
I would suggest that you two get together and.
I think it's reprehensible, the fact that our family would give the village this property for $1, which was a bad deal. And then now, we're getting charged for quote, in your aspect of viewpoint of overuse because of maybe a possible tenant that might come in. I don't think it's fair, I don't think it's equitable, and I don't think it's reasonable. And I'm also against your approval of this section 435.22, chapter 435. I think you're hastily running into a burning house. You haven't seen how this metering is going to work out yet. I will take it one step at a time. I know, speaking as a BID member and the leader of my Southwest Quadrant, everyone I've talked to is not happy with what's transpiring as far as remediation of this parking problem. I think you need to see, as Ms. Devlin has advised, let's see how much money comes in with your parking. Let's see how much money is going to be made available from the state and the county, maybe even federal funds. I know what the plan is prospectively as far as taking certain properties are concerned. We've certainly spent enough money out of the BID with level 1 associates as far as the research is concerned, and see what the costs are going to be for the construction institution of 4 parking decks, which is probably a very good idea. Some commercial owners have property of their own. Maybe you might investigate the possibility of letting them or helping them build their own parking lots. You know, that's not impossible to alleviate the problem. they might be able to make money on their own privately too, with selling parking spaces. I think, with what you just announced, that you've got an option between either raising the taxes with the village residents, or donning the commercial owners for this undue expense. What happened to cross-the-board taxes, real property taxes, both the residents and the commercial owners share? I don't see where you're having a division on that. It doesn't make any sense. I think there's a lot of questions that still need to be addressed. And another item too is, if you do go ahead with the institution of this section, are you going to have a delineation as far as the uses are concerned that are going to be responsible for participating in this? Is it going to be itemized? What happens if you have somebody comes in, like the cupcake store? Is that going to be deemed as a restaurant? Is that going to be deemed as a bakery? It's not on campus cooking. They're bringing the finished product to the site. That's a retail store in my mind. And the fact that maybe you're letting them sit down at a couple tables to eat the product, is that going to cause you to view that as a quasi-restaurant? I think you've got a problem there. You've got a problem with office space that's being used maybe by quasi-medical doctors. Maybe somebody decides to have acupuncture in the second floor office, or maybe he's going to have an eye doctor in the second floor office. How are you going to handle these increments?
I think the powers of the zoning board of appeals that might be able to grant special exceptions to this provision.
Yeah, well, we
I
went
think
through that a second ago with
that
Mr. Egan. He just said he didn't want to leave that to the planning board. It's a lot better to have it mapped out in print, so people can have notice of this before they come to the table with a planning board application. A planning board application, in most cases, is usually settled before you even get to the hearing.
I was thinking more specifically, say your Queen City Cupcake issue, you know, is it a restaurant or not? And that might be debated at the zoning board of appeals, and maybe they would be granted a special exception.
I think that's unfair that you would force these people to have to come to a zoning board of appeals hearing for such a small municipal exception. It's, you know, it's not easy out there trying to make enough money to pay these taxes. These taxes are killing everybody, and now you're looking at really serving it up in the faces of the commercial landowners to take care of a commercial parking situation, which really has been brought on by the village giving part of the property in back of Sweezy's to TriTech. How many spaces do we lose there? How much land do we lose in that TriTech project? Do we lose half our parking lot?
Not when it's finished.
A net zero change.
It's
They
net
made
zero.
Actually, there's a tiny net increase. When the parking lot on the corner of Jennings and Lake Street is open to parking, I think it's 6 new spaces. Seriously. It's not huge, but there's no loss. Now, that's not addressing the question of adequacy.
No.
It's a different question altogether.
Well, all right, I think I've burned everybody's ears enough, but I appreciate your time, and you know how I feel. I'm against the institution of this section.
I got a cup of coffee with your name on it in my office, so look at those
Yeah,
bags.
well, maybe a hot chocolate.
All right, deal.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Yeah.
Jean Donnelly from 17 Lambert Lane in Riverwalk Condos. Good afternoon, good evening, everybody. I guess my question is, first of all, where exactly is D3 designated as? What is that section designated? Roughly.
It's the very core of downtown.
Right.
So it's roughly from on North Ocean, from Oak Street
Right.
to Church Street,
Okay.
on North Ocean, South Ocean. Main Street from Railroad Avenue to Ryder Avenue.
Right. I guess my question is, I travel a lot through business, and I've seen other areas that are growing, the way Patchogue is growing, and some of the things that I've seen, some of what you're talking about in finding parking, it sounds to me like it's not gonna be anywhere near the area where you wanna go. So if you're gonna go to a restaurant, it's not gonna be like a short walking distance. It sounds, based on what I'm seeing and what's going on around Patchogue. But I've seen in other cities that I've been in, where they've created municipal parking that is a distance away. They have entrepreneurs that start businesses that run shuttle services and charge minimal amount, but they make money off of the deal. They pay taxes to the village for doing business there. And you can put parking lots in areas that are easier and cheaper to find, but have people that are looking to build businesses to just shuttle people back and forth. Nobody wants to be walking from like anywhere of a distance, but if you have companies that can come in and do that sort of thing, I've seen it down in West Palm Beach, I've seen it out towards the Hamptons, I've seen it in other cities like in Washington and Virginia, and it seems to work really well. Usually it's a guy that has like a golf cart that has 2 or 3 benches, and they pick people up, and it's within a radius of the downtown area. It might be 5 or more miles. And they charge like maybe $5 for you to get in the cab, and they come and pick you up, you have a number to call them, and you can buy parking further away that's way cheaper, and you might be able to encourage people to do something like that, because it just doesn't sound like anything that we're doing or talking about doing is really gonna solve the problem, because there's so much growth in one real small area, and then it's residential all around it, that there's not really space to buy this parking that you're talking about. And we wind up getting all the overflow parking on our streets and in our lots and things like that, but I think that we're really not addressing the major problem to find space. So, I don't know, I was just putting it out there for somebody to think about, because I've seen it work in other places. So, thanks.
Anybody else? Mark?
Mark Spiegel from Blums, and I've been saying this, the one thing we have to do is get those, the car things. You know, you go in and you have like 5 stories, 3 stories, 2 stories, well, probably 3 stories.
I mean, those things they use in the city and
Right, the cars go in, or they drive in and park. Parking garage, thank you. It's the best thing, and there's probably a lot of money, I've never looked into it, but somehow we can get a grant from the government. That's the only thing I can see.
Are you talking about tier parking?
Yeah, instead of buying property, put the money into that, behind the church and the temple, make a deal with them, whatever, for their parishioners and their, people. We need parking spots. We are getting bigger, more people coming to us, and we're about to go, redo the whole store. So we'll hopefully get, we're advertising in Nassau County now, and radio. We did Newsday already, so we're gonna get even larger. I mean, I just went to a party for the radio station, and they say to me, they think it's gonna be a great thing, there's gonna be a lot of people. We get people already, but it's gonna be even bigger.
Well, the money from the fees on this and from the parking meters is gonna go into a fund to either buy properties, which there are a few target areas here right around the village that would be advantageous to a lot of people here if we bought those properties and knocked them down and built surface parking, which is, as Brian said, it's $13,000 a space, whereas a parking garage is about $30,000 a space.
Yeah, okay, I know, and a lot
So,
of money.
and it's a much quicker process,
Yeah.
buying houses, knocking them down, and building.
What house are
parking
you gonna knock down by us?
I really don't
Those
know.
houses behind, that's gonna be
Rather
taken
not
over by
say
the
but
road
we're
kid, and
trying.
they built that big building.
Which one?
The road,
He's
Pete
talking about
Road
the
built,
assisted living.
yeah,
Oh,
the living. They'll take those buildings, what are we gonna have? The
Well,
same?
Your
little
lot
spot.
back there was one of the lots that we're considering with, who's the people who are designing the parking spaces.
Oh,
Parking, the Roush
through the Roush
Foundation, yeah,
Foundation?
For what?
to do a multi-level.
Yeah, all right, good, all right.
The Roush Foundation has paid several design teams to work with several downtowns to come up with ideas specific to tier parking.
All right,
So
good.
we're one of them, and there's a design team assigned to us, and we walk all around
That'd
downtown.
be the
with
best,
them.
I mean, that'd be the best
But,
thing.
We'll see what they come up with in
Yeah.
January.
All right. See ya.
Thank you, Mark. Mr. Bojack?
John Bojack, 8 Knoxon Street. Yeah, I spent the weekend reading this law, and it is very complicated. And listening to the discussion this evening so far, I find it a little bit more complicated. So let me just see if I understand. I have a copy of the law in front of me. So this law says, any property located within the D3 business district proximate to municipal parking shall be credited with a number of parking spaces. That's the beginning of the credit concept. This says any property. Mr. Egan, you said there is a differentiation between retail and other businesses. I don't see that mentioned here in the law. Where did that come from? Didn't you say that would not apply to retail?
No,
This credit
no.
will not apply to retail?
No, you're mixing concepts up, and I can get into it. As I said at the beginning, it is
One
very
surprise.
complicated.
Right,
It's
right.
very complicated. No, a retail use would be, we're using the retail use as the baseline to set the parking credits. So if you were going, if you read the next line after what you just stopped at, the number of parking spaces to be credited
Right.
shall be calculated with the number of spaces of the retail and service business rate as set forth in 435-31A8,
Okay.
which is one parking space for every 150 square feet of gross floor area of the building.
Right.
So the sentence you read the next sentence, that says you're gonna credit for the retail and service business.
Right.
So if you're gonna open up a retail store, the intention was, if you were gonna open up a retail store, and you would then get a full credit for your parking, you'd be credited the full amount. Because obviously, if you open up a retail store, you're not gonna be required to put any additional parking that a restaurant would need.
Okay.
So you'd be credited with the retail amount. So it would be, the result would be, for a retail store, the parking requirement would be neutral, meaning zero.
Okay, now this credit you're talking about, is this a one-size-all-fits credit though?
Yes.
Okay, now let me ask you this, again.
One size fits all per use, but not necessarily per square footage.
Okay, but let me ask you this. Article 4, the section is really 435 is again, how many angels on the head of the pin here, but 435-31A8 in the law that you propose says, which is one parking space for every 150 square feet of gross area of the building, right? But the actual law says that same amount plus one space for every employee on duty during the larger shift.
Correct.
That's a much more generous credit. So why have you shrunk the credit?
When the committee debated the credit, they wanted to set a firm baseline because it's a hypothetical. So if you were going to allow the second extension, as you said, plus per employee on shift?
It's the present existing law.
Correct.
Right.
The credit is based on, this was taken a lot from the town of Huntington. The reason why the employee shift change is hypothetical, because you're being based on, there really is there's no employee at the fictional baseline. Let me tell you why. If you were to open up a restaurant, using my 3,000 square feet example, if you're gonna open up a restaurant, and we were gonna credit you at the 3,000 square feet, 20 spaces.
Right.
It's a hypothetical arbitrary credit, meaning I can't then say, oh, but A8 says, what about employees? Well, there is no employees for a credit for the hypothetical baseline. The baseline is only setting it on square footage, not for employees.
Okay,
And I think what your next nuance is, well, what if you were really doing a retail, shouldn't you really take into account employee
Actually,
credits?
my point to you is this. There's a discrepancy between what is in the proposed law and the actual law. It does not, the actual law here is what I read you. This proposal says that the actual law is something different from what it actually is. This is a drafting error, isn't it?
No,
Why isn't it?
well, I
This
apologize, I'm doing a poor
this
job
sentence-
explaining what the
No,
baseline is.
you're doing a perfectly well job. I can understand English very well.
John, if I may, that code does not apply to D3.
Well,
No, but we're
no parking
utilizing,
code applies to
that's
D3,
the
right?
code.
There's no parking code.
I
But
think
that's
what
the
the
code
intention,
that this law is seeking to imply
correct.
into the zone as well. that is.
The intention of this sentence was to set, the reason why it cited A was to say that we're gonna use the retail code amount. One space for every 150 square feet, that's the same as retail. And then your point is, well, look, but that really says plus one space for every employee.
Correct.
The reason why the plus one space for every employee of a business, it works on a retail basis. However, it doesn't work to apply the baseline for other uses, because there really is no there really is no retail store to compare against. It's just using it on a square footage basis.
All right, basically, when you come down to it, though, you're changing the language that at present exists, and there is a new standard for the credit, is that correct? We're leaving out this thing about credits for employees.
This is only for in the D3 district.
Yes, in the D3
No
district.
changes anywhere else. So if you were gonna open up a retail store in D2
Right.
or any other commercial district,
We're not
the
talking about
employees
that.
change, stays the same.
Right, we're not
In
talking about that.
D3, the retail credit would be this one space. There would be no credit for employees, that's correct.
Okay, and that, again, under that same chapter, I see that restaurants, we have a whole section for food serving establishments, which is again, square footage plus parking for employees, even more generous than mentioned before, which would give businesses an even larger credit if that language had been used, but it's not being used. Correct?
Incorrect.
Incorrect.
The retail credit is the only one that has that extra subsection for employees. If you were gonna use your hypothetical, the zoning board would have to apply the restaurant. Don't forget also, by the way, restaurant is not just square footage, it's a greater than. So it says restaurants, 1 per 2 seats,
Right.
or 1 per 100 square feet of floor area, or 1 per 3 persons legally accommodated, in the next line, whichever is greater, plus 1 space for every employee.
Right.
When you're drafting the law, depending upon square footage and fire code and all those things, you don't really know which of those 3 are going to apply.
Right.
That set, 435, Article 4, 435, sets out the parking requirement for that space. And the building department can calculate that down to the person.
You know what? You convinced me that what's in the law is smarter than all these different exceptions, so I'm just gonna go with that 150 square feet. It's more understandable.
Yeah.
And my last point on this is this. Later on, I know you're voting on the in lieu of fee, which is $400. I think in light of discussions here that these spaces cost $13,000. The $400 is quite a small amount to expect as a contribution. I would raise that sum to $4,000. And that might be actually a contribution to the village's campaign to create more parking. Because when these businesses expand, they are going to create a demand, and it's going to have to be met by the village of Patchogue. Thank you.
When we get to that part of the discussion, we have examples of what other communities charge.
Okay, I don't know what they are, but I think there should be a real relationship between the cost of those parking spaces and what they're coming up with. I think $400 is inadequate.
Thank you. George?
George Hope, Brickhouse Brewery, 67 West Main Street. Just to clarify, the law does not apply to the tri-type
Correct.
because it's a different zone.
Correct.
So they can fill their entire retail space with restaurants with no consequence.
Correct. The thought was, that's the DRD zone, the Downtown Redevelopment District Zone, and that parking is considered as part of its overall site plan. All the uses were included in that site plan. Whereas each other property in the D3 district is its own property application.
But it was not adequately considered. Okay, I just wanted to clarify. Thank you, George.
Ken?
Good evening, Dennis Strauss, 31 Main Street. This fee that you're proposing is going on the back of the wrong individuals. Last Friday night, I did a head count of employees from the tap room to Parabel. There's 443 employees. There was 3 cars, mine was one of the 3, in Briarcliff Lodge, and there was no cars in the back by the Temple Church on Friday night. This is about 9:30 at night. This is long before Emporium, while Emporium had the greatest number of those employees. There's no patrons there yet, they're a handful at best. Most of the restaurants were full, obviously, that's and more at the end of the dinner hour. But the employees, these owners of these large establishments, and there's a bunch of them through Main Street, any fee that's gonna be imposed upon this village should go on their back and credit them back if they can get one employee to park outside of church lot, theater lot, or church lot. You're putting the fee on the wrong people's back. I'm sorry. That's where the parking downtown will never have an adequate number, will never have an adequate survey until you remove the employees from the equation. Do we need more parking? You know what, it really is a fair question. We don't even know, because we can't make an adequate assessment of the parking volume based on that gross number of employees between Parabel, 89, Barbecue, Emporium, and J&R's. Those employees, that's where your lost parking goes. That's where the revenue, you want to generate revenue for parking, throw it on their backs. They're the ones who have abused the parking and have destroyed the downtown. Now, I'm not destroyed downtown, but that have brought us to this point that we're losing small businesses because of it. Quench, Cupcake, Quench changed hands, Cupcake's gonna change hands. Best of luck to both of them. But this is where our problem lies. And like the other village people have said, we're asking the wrong people to pay the tab here. And I know we're talking down the road with the tier parking and stuff, but Mr. Egan, with all due respect, I'll build you all the parking you want, 30,000 space. I'll have it for you very quickly. I'll take that contract. The tier parking, that's an obscure number. I don't know where that number came from, who's giving you that one. Please, as a board, don't be buying parking for 30,000 space. It's a bad number.
So you said
low?
It's terribly high. I'll provide you all you want, I'll take the contract tonight.
Where did
I
you get
hope-
that number?
believe me.
No, we got-
That number comes from a number of different organizations who are talking.
Right.
That's gotta have land included and at a bad price, or at a high price.
Probably has to be prevailing wage.
I met with the people from the Roush Foundation, even gave us a little higher than that, $35,000 per space. So that's, if you do the math, you'll see that.
Well, it's an extremely large garage, the new one, the Aqueduct Race Casino thing, that came in at 9,000. Now your cost goes considerably down when you start getting it larger, I understand that. But that came in at around 9,000 for a casino, per space.
That's
That's
gotta be
three-
way larger than.
That's 3 tiers of parking. It's got a whole 2,000 cars. But that, like I said, so you're gonna get it's going to come down, but not
Now you're talking
a
about
third.
something that holds 2,000 cars, to
And we
something
built
like
that
200 cars.
Yeah, in the city,
A little different.
and that was built off shift, and, the labor cost on that, and it still came at 9,000. So,
Can
like I
you
said, I'll
show
take
us, do you have documents to show us?
to the parade, they did the,
Can you send me a copy of that?
I don't know if I can get copies of this information, but.
So I'm interested, if you're
Yeah.
saying 9,000, I need
Nine-
to see
Yeah,
that.
so they're bringing, they had a job, I worked the job, and, that was what their bid was.
Yeah, well, if
Put-
you've got
put
the
it up.
information, I'd really love to have it, I think we'd
okay.
all like to see that, so just
All
drop
right,
it off
yeah,
my
I'll-
mailbox here.
It's in the doggy foot. But like I said, back to we need to do something with the employees, that's where the fee should be levied, and I don't know how you would do it in that direction. Your square footage thing is not gonna accommodate, for the
Well,
number.
it's hard to put that on the backs of employees who are making,
But you know what?
they're making here in the village, and every store, every restaurant needs employees.
I get that,
What
but
makes it
you
work.
know what?
The employees should be parking furthest away from the establishment,
like
and
I
that's, that's an education program that it still has not been able to get through the
Many of them
the
don't
people who
believe
do.
they should.
they don't think that they should be parking far away. So you go into the parking lots like your parking lot at 8 o'clock in the morning, and all the good spaces are 9 o'clock in the morning, all the good spaces are taken already. And those aren't shoppers,
Correct.
those are people who are working there. So until they decide that you know, it's, not every store is like Mark's store where they have the employees park further away, or the old Sweezies. It's, you know, it's an education thing that the employees need to park furthest away. But you have to have employees, you have a successful village, you need
I
employees to
understand,
manage.
they have to be there, but that's where, that is our biggest parking issue problem. Like I said, in all the studies that you do and provide, none of that ever gets brought into the equation. You know, you say we're out of parking, well, how do we know? You know, well, with the parking that we have, I park where I live when I come home late on weekend nights, and it's real easy to find a parking space there, which is incredible. That lot should be filled with employees, and it's not. And that, you know, this is what I talked about 2 weeks ago at the meeting, when I said people broke promises at this podium. Bobby, you said it, JR said it, Morgan said it, all three of you stood here and said, yes, we'll have, it needs to burn down the lot. The church lot will have our employees park in the outlying areas. I'm sorry. Thank you for your time.
Anyone else?
This is tantamount to a tariff, it's a T-tax. Basically, you're gonna make it impossible for landowners, commercial owners to attract tenants if they're gonna be subdued to a situation like this. It's totally inequitable.
Brian, within the language of this, where was it that you had made mention about the credit for any new construction or expansion or the enlargement of the premises, as long as it's for retail or office space?
You know, that's a gloss that would come up that the committee had suggested, and it was a good suggestion. Just before any new construction, the sentence starts at any new construction,
Right.
there'd be an insert there to new construction, which again, aside from retail or professional offices, shall not be eligible for the credit. And I think that should solve that ambiguity. New construction aside from retail or professional offices shall not be eligible for the credit. So any construction of a new retail or professional office would be eligible for the credit.
I'm just thinking, if the credit is calculated off the use, and the use is retail or office, would that be sufficient?
Would, but you know, just to clarify that any new construction would not.
So new
So you
construction,
would-
you're building Macy's, you're not gonna get a credit,
Napa,
or now.
it's new construction, right?
Correct.
If he's building a retail under this, the way the original draft would be, he would have to,
Okay,
he wouldn't get any credit because it's new.
right.
So to change that.
All right, I understand that.
Okay.
I got
So
it.
if you were gonna put if you were going to put a second floor on Perivale, and it's a retail or professional office space, you would be eligible for the credit.
Right.
However, if you were going to put a second floor on Perivale and put in a second restaurant, like Italy, you would not be eligible for the credit.
Correct.
That makes sense.
No, the number 400 has been talked about.
That's later.
Right.
That's not,
What I would recommend is you close the public hearing, have have to have a vote. And then if you want to bring that resolution up now, you can do that before we go on to anything else.
Okay. Are there any more questions from the board? A motion on this?
Motion. Motion to adopt as written, with the one change that Brian mentioned.
Second. Second. Second by trustee Cream. All in favor?
No.
Opposed?
No.
Trustee Ferber opposed? Passes.
My first no.
You were right first time.
Well,
Okay.
it's about time.
Did you want to do that resolution next, Eric, or do you want to
What do you recommend?
Resolution next. I recommend you do a resolution. Not a public hearing, it's only a resolution.
Yes.
We have a resolution here to set payment in lieu of parking space fee. Here, the fee for payment in lieu of parking spaces, here is $400 per parking space.
That was, the origin of that resolution was that was an arbitrary number that I had set. It really should have been just Xed out, it really was just an arbitrary number. For example, in the village of Valley Stream, the parking space, and just for example, for what they charge in other communities, the village of Valley Stream is $2,000 to $3,100 per space. The village of Nyack is $6,000 per space. The village of Westbury is $125 to $375 plus $50 per space, and that's an annual fee, annually on the expansion. The village of Glen Cove has an extremely complicated staggered system, fee structure, but they go up to $2,000 per space at a maximum. Again, the quote on the, just to complete the record, on the $13,000 parking space versus new structured parking is $30,000 per space. That was a quote from consultants for the city of Glen Cove, done by the Turner Miller Group, who are land use professionals out of Suffering. But that was just their number. We've heard numbers in excess of that, both from our own extensive parking meter studies when we went to look to see about what the options were for parking meters or building the structure.
Any thoughts on that?
I think our own tier parking study that the biz did, I think it said 20, but still it's a bunch of money. It's not tier.
Anyway, $400, everybody's flexible, and I'd like to see something like $1,500.
Jay?
The one thing that I have a concern about is, setting a number, and I talked to Brian about this earlier, is that it gets outdated. That it does, like, the economics of our village change in a way in which, whether it's 2,000 or 1,500 or 1,000, it's either too much or too little, What will our future needs be, and as those change, as long as we have the flexibility to change that number by resolution, I think it'll alleviate burden on our board in the future. But I think, I agree with Mr. Bojack, is that, and Mr. Ross, who said earlier, that these businesses that are coming in, well, we want to encourage them, right? We want to see some growth in the village. They are profiting at our expense a great deal. And other small businesses have suffered. Businesses such as, the bridal shops, Lums, any of the small businesses that have been here for a long, long time, they are facing challenges that they haven't seen, previously. So I would be more inclined to set that, like Joe said, around $1,500 to even $2,000 per space. And if a restaurateur wants to come in and take over the Sports Hall of Fame, if he was looking to build a restaurant from scratch in the D2, he'd have to provide that parking, right? And there are built-in costs that he would have to budget for. So, so I would be inclined to make it much more than 400, and I wouldn't feel uncomfortable about raising it to $2,000 per space.
Tom? Thoughts on this?
I've got real mixed feelings about the fee. I mean, I understand what it costs to provide a parking space. Whether it's 13,000 or 10,000 for a parking, to buy the land, knock the building down.
That number, Tom, as I said before, doesn't include land acquisition. I mean, if we're looking to buy a piece of property that has certain rights to it, it's a multifamily building or whatever, the costs to acquire that property, it will inflate that $13,000 per space.
Yeah, but I worry about, by the way, if we were voting on this a year from now, and we saw the consequences of what our meters do and so on, I would probably be voting for it. Okay, I think we're getting a little ahead of ourselves with this. But, when you're opening a business, your eyes are wide open if we say, it's $1,000 or $2,000. You know that's a cost that you're going to incur to open your business in the village of Patchogue. In D3. Right? I'd rather see a smaller fee and have it apply every year or something like that.
What?
I don't know about the applying every year, it seems, I have a feeling it would be a little bit unmanageable. I don't know, it looks to me like, based on what some of these other communities that Brian's pointed out, that something in the range of 1,500, I would be comfortable with.
Bill?
Well, I'm torn. I certainly think that even 2,000, if it was to be a one-time fee, even I think that's low. Certainly these guys make enough in one evening to cover 2,000 bars and restaurants. I would imagine that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, but the fee wouldn't just be $2,000, it would be based on
Per
space,
space.
which could be.
Could be 20 spaces.
Yeah.
Right, and I also don't like a one-time fee. But I understand that, like Lloyd said, an annual fee seems to turn into a county nightmare. But it would seem to me it would be more practical to be able to look at that fee, look at the payment on the bond is, that you're suggesting, and see how we're doing on it. As far as just having a big lump in the bank, it's really hard for you to determine. So I'm somewhat on the fence.
Brian, with regards to the actual determining, you had mentioned before that to determine how many spaces are actually needed, it was the greater of three things, right? So
For a restaurant.
for a restaurant. So if they build out a space like the Suffolk Sports Hall of Fame, but they're in their site plan, they only want to put in 4 tables to try and lowball this number, right? So how do we?
It's based on square feet.
It's based upon the square footage then, right? So
You only gain it so much because, as an example that I used earlier, you can only, you would get the greater of one of those numbers. So if someone opens up it's a 10,000 square foot restaurant, and only wants to say they're only going to serve 4 dinners a night, maybe they're eccentric, and they want to only have a very exclusive
Very
clientele.
expensive dinner.
Right, very expensive dinner.
that's one way. I'm not trying to be cheeky because you have businesses on the south end of the village that they submitted an original site plan of what their restaurant was supposed to look like, and it barred certain part of their establishment from any sort of occupancy. It's supposed to be used for storage, but all of a sudden there's tables up there, they're holding parties up there, or they're expanding onto the outer part of there, and they haven't really compensated or addressed that to the village. So, I just want to make sure that if we're going to set a number, that a potential restaurateur that's looking to take over the space isn't going to game the system by saying, okay, I'm only putting in 4 tables, and I'm only gonna have 16 patrons, you know what I mean?
This,
I don't have a point there.
absolute, good concern. Article 4 is the standard parking code for all of these areas. So for the whole village, this applies. This is the first time it's applying to D3. I think that at least my feedback from the zoning board and the planning board, they haven't had a problem applying that situation based upon the greater ups. But for instance, along that same line, as we heard the example before about saying, well, look, you left off for the employees, it says plus 1 space for every employee on duty during the largest shift. If you're in a Denny's, my guess is the breakfast is going to be a bigger shift. Whereas if you're at a barbecue restaurant, you could potentially have a larger lunch crowd. And if you're at a fine dining nighttime experience, you're going to have a dinner crowd that's going to be the largest. So that's why that extra gloss, while inappropriate to set a baseline for a mathematical basis, is appropriate for movable, real-world restaurant operations like that. In a complicated way, I'm trying to say that, you know, the code here hopefully catches the existing code as it exists and last amended by this board in 2012, actually, would catch a lot of those items.
So when they make an application, okay, they want to change their use or intensify their use, they'll go in front of the zoning and planning boards and they'll ask them those hard questions.
Right, have to state their case as they do now. Generally, the building inspector on the site plan and the building permit will calculate what that maximum occupancy is based on the fire code. And then they'll have their layout, and then the planning board on a site plan or the zoning board on the variances will determine what that, how accurate that is.
Well, I'm hearing a sort of a range here from $1,000 to $2,000. Am I hearing that right, or I just
Yeah.
read it? I mean, 1,000, 2,000. So it's our duty here to come up with a number, correct?
Correct. Yes.
Since it seems like the $1,500 mark is what people are kind of looking at, I'm gonna go where I think it should be at least $1,500, you know, this is my own opinion. To make this law at least get some teeth, and that the money that the people are gonna be putting into this fund will be significant enough to buy property, pay parking. I think 400 is a little kind of low. It would take a long time to fill that bucket up with money to be able to do what we want to do. And I know that combined with the parking meters and this, I think go a long way into helping us buy properties to build surface parking. Tier parking is another question that's down the road too. But I'm going to go for $1,500. I think that's my thought. So how do we do this, Brian?
I'm just make the resolution, I make a motion at 1,500.
I kind of like that number, Jack. I think you kind of split it down the middle, and as long as it's flexible enough and easy enough to change that number based upon the economics of the village, I think it makes sense. And just, you know, sort of like a trial. We're going to see how it goes, so we need to adjust the number if we can.
All right, I can make a motion. Make a motion to adopt this resolution with the fee of $1,500. Second by trustee Keys. Just second by trustee Keys. All in favor?
There's anyone that has a discussion?
Yeah, this, one more discussion on the resolution.
I was just wondering if we're prepared to vote on this. Honestly, we are.
I made the motion, and trustee Keys second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Abstain.
You're abstaining?
He's aye.
Oh, you're on
Yes. I'm an abstainer.
a, no,
Can we
an
take
abstention.
Can we take a roll call here, just to?
Aye.
Aye.
Abstain.
Aye.
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 Motion passed. Thank you.
Okay, on to the final hearing of the evening. Notice is hereby given that a public hearing will be held on Monday, November 20th, 14 Baker Street, Patchogue, New York, by the Village Board of the Incorporated Village of Patchogue, to add section 435-81.2 to the Village Code to allow rooftop dining in the D3 Business District upon issuance of a special permit, copy of the proposed local laws on file at the office of the village clerk. At said public hearing, any person interested will be given the opportunity to be heard.
Okay, rooftop dining.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, prolonging the evening with another local law tonight on rooftop dining.
But they're all related.
Yes, yes. This is a rooftop dining that will apply, that will only be permitted in D3. Rooftop dining by this legislation is proposed to only be permitted in D3 and not permitted in any other zone of the village. It's proposed to be issued by a special permit issued by the planning board. Special permit would be good for 1 year. Conceptual site plan will have to be submitted to the building inspector. And once upon approval, they have to submit a final plan to the building inspector. I want to read through the 12 criteria.
Yes.
Let me also start by saying that the genesis of the research from the office was that rooftop dining is one of the #1 concerns for the New York community boards in the city, the local NYCB boards. And we sought to synthesize the best of restrictions or limitations from the community boards to learn from New York City's experience, because they have rooftop dining, patio dining, and the noise and the things related to those issues are one of the most vexing, but probably the #1 issue on almost all of the agendas in the New York community boards. One, the rooftop area shall be associated with the establishment doing business within the principal building. The floor immediately below the rooftop area must be occupied by non-residential use. That's obviously to avoid any kind of a conflict, and any company expanding their building like a mushroom, thinking that they can go onto adjoining rooftops. The operation of the rooftop area must not negatively impact the use and enjoyment of the neighboring properties. Use of the rooftop shall not exceed the hours of operation for the principal use. So that rooftop cannot stay open if the restaurant below is closed. It can be open or occupied later than 11 p.m. on Fridays and Saturdays, and 10 p.m. on Sundays through Thursdays. Not just open, but occupied, so it must be vacated by that time, because we know that voices carry. Rooftop area must be more than 750 feet from an A residential zone. The rooftop shall be surrounded by adequate railing or walling no less than 42 inches in height. That was a recommendation by our chief building inspector. No live entertainment, music, speakers, television, or public address system shall be permitted on the rooftop. The windows and doors to areas where such noise originates must be closed at all times except when being used as a permitted means of egress. Applicant must maintain the rooftop area as a quiet, relaxed environment, again, to encourage rooftop dining as opposed to other things. No service areas, bars, or preparation stations shall be permitted on the rooftop. All service must be made from inside the establishment. The intention is to allow waiter and waitress service at tables, not to allow an area of a bar, to allow congregation on a rooftop around a service bar. Glass or ceramic ware, utensils, or beverage containers shall not be permitted. Only paper or plastic ware, utensils, and beverage containers shall be permitted on the rooftop. The concern was items being thrown from the roof, bottles, those kind of things. This is quite a restriction, but it may be something that in the future, the board may want to consider potentially, at least just maybe for dinnerware, but not bottles or those kind of things. Rolling items that roll off the roofs and fall. Main access to the rooftop shall be from the interior space of the business within the principal building. Meaning there can't be an outside staircase unless required by the fire code, but that can't be the main access to the rooftop. The fire code states in certain instances that there has to be 2 means of egress off of a roof, but the main access must be from within the principal building. Lighting fixtures, as Trustee Devlin, I'm sure, would insist be dark sky compliant, effectively eliminate glare and sharply cut off lighting levels at the property line. All lights associated should be turned off, and they have to be below or at railing level. Smoking shall be prohibited on the rooftop area. That's the obvious concern with people passing by having litter tossed on them. Use of the rooftop shall meet all applicable requirements of the federal, state, and village code, including fire prevention and building code. No tables shall be closer than 36 inches from a railing, again, to prevent things from going over the edge. Then it goes on to say that the punishments are penalties and revocations of the special permit.
Okay, Attorney Egan, you said this is a concern in New York City with rooftop dining. Do you know of any municipalities here on Long Island that have been dealing with this issue?
Not that I know directly on Long Island. I do know that most codes, like the village code, sometimes most codes are reactive as opposed to proactive. This is an attempt to be proactive with the village, but most codes are silent on the use of rooftops, because it's generally a non-habitable space.
I haven't seen much evidence of it, and
Right.
I travel a lot around the island to restaurants, but I am aware of what Brian is referring to in New York City. It's a big, big problem. Just getting control of the noise, from what I understand.
Yeah. No, I think that we should change the weekday from 10 to 9. Because the noise does travel, and where's that on?
That's number 3.
Number 3. At 9:00 p.m. Sunday through Thursday. And also, like I said before, I think if we have to start worrying about whether people will start throwing plates and glasses off the roof, despite the fact that there's a 42-inch, obviously, fenced-in fence. I think that we should drop the glass. Gonna go out and spend $30 on dinner. I'm sure they're not gonna eat it off the paper plate with the plastic fork.
Yeah, I felt the same way about
You know, and if I'm gonna have a cocktail or wine night, I think that that's, as far as New York City, it probably applies. Hopefully, we don't have those types of situations here in Patchogue to the degree that we have to do this type of thing. But I see 1 or 2 plates going off the roof, and I'm sure that they'll be dealt with appropriately.
Unless they fall off the roof onto somebody's head.
Anything's gonna fall off the roof onto somebody's head.
Joe?
I like the idea of rooftop dining. I think it's a real neat concept, and I think that the restrictions that are in here are necessary and really, I mean, just about everything that we could hope for, you know. My concerns are that, I mean, they're only as good as our ability to enforce every one of them. And while most of the restaurants in our village are good neighbors, compliant, adhere to whatever restrictions are placed upon them, there are those few that kind of thumb their noses at us in any courts and any restrictions that we put. They really don't care, and it seems they kind of get away with it for a long time. I'm afraid that sooner, it's only a matter of time before one of these restaurants, you know, start pushing the envelope. Also concerned with, you know, we kind of burst into seams now in the village, and I worry about staffing of our code and DPW and the pressure these kinds of things put on it. And whatever the fees are gonna be for the additional parking, I can almost see going towards paying for another 2 code officers or people at DPW, so that, you know, keep maintaining the village. So those are my thoughts. So like Billy was on the other issue, I'm coming to him because I think the concept is really good. And I know Brian, you're saying we should be a little proactive, get ahead of the game, and you know, maybe we're just not prepared, and we should be a little more proactive in preparing ourselves for it. You know, I wouldn't want to see it just completely off the table, but I don't know if there's a way to postpone it back. I mean, I know someday it's coming. I just don't know. My own, like I said, my concerns are kind of staffing. I don't know, can we handle it right now?
The one thing that I would like to add to this, and I was up in Newport just a couple of weeks ago, and there were a number of rooftop establishments. It's just a neat concept, and the one thing that I would be maybe looking to include in this would be any sort of like heating device. You know, you see these like to extend the season, they might put those like mushroom things that would. So I would like that to be included in this. That, you know, if it's not warm enough for somebody to go up there and go up, you know, let's
Prohibit them? Prohibit the heating element?
prohibit the heating element. You know.
Oh, you want to prohibit the heating elements? Oh, I think you wanted to require them.
I mean, not only for just, I don't know how combustible those things are, and whether or not that might be,
No, I've been in so many places that use them. Yeah, they've got them outside Main Street Cafe, something like that.
On the road.
Right, on the road, but not on top of a roof that might, you know,
Hate to get hit in the head with one of those.
Well, for that matter, what about, you know, umbrellas? I mean, do we allow umbrellas up there? Over the table? They can easily blow, like the pool, they can easily blow off. God knows where they have them. Yeah, you're probably right there. I think, said the health department probably.
Yeah,
Umbrellas?
definitely.
Umbrellas, the health department.
Can't serve food.
Brian, if I understand this correctly, this is change of use, right?
Well, it's not necessarily a change of use, only because
Expansion.
it's an expansion of the existing.
Okay,
use.
so it's an expansion of an existing use, so I wanna put a rooftop facility on my existing facility. That means I'm subject to the new regulations that we just passed, so I've gotta lay out $1,500 for every space upstairs, plus downstairs.
No, just on your expansion.
Just on my expansion?
Yeah.
Okay, I don't read that.
Yes.
That's
New construction.
New construction. Okay.
Well, I like those heated things.
you like to get things?
Yeah. I go to a lot of places where it's, you know, it's borderline time of year, it's spring, it's autumn, and you wanna be outside, but when you're sitting still at a table, it's just maybe a little breezy, and they bring that thing over, and it's great.
As long as it's, you know,
I think they're
We
pretty
could be-
safe, I've seen them used all over the place, California.
the only concern that I have is that all of a sudden it creates a fire hazard. So if the fire marshal is fine with it, then I would be inclined to agree with you, but my initial concern would be is that it might pose a hazard.
I would think we'd leave it to the fire marshal and see.
I think if we're gonna pass this code, we should make the dining experience as pleasant as possible. We should not say, you have to have paper plates. We should not say, you can't have music. If they're gonna have music, it has to comply with our noise ordinance. All right, I mean, you want to,
Yeah.
yeah, but you go to these places in the city that are on rooftops, I'm sure it was up in Newport. It's a beautiful thing. They put ornamental ivy around the edge, you know. The lighting, it comes out to be a very romantic, very desirable. People want to get in these places, you know. If we dumb it down, I mean, or ugly it up, I'm not sure how you want to put it, but it becomes far less desirable. By the way, do we have to do this?
No,
We don't have to.
but just, the board should know there was an application that was before the planning board that was turned down for other reasons unrelated to
Yeah.
the substance of the application. But that applicant sued the planning board under Article 78. By negotiating with the attorney, this law and the parking law, that we adjourned the return date of the Article 78. Because he wouldn't want to have his Article 78 to be mooted or otherwise impacted by laws that were being passed. But it is coming. And the question is whether we manage it or ban it.
Well, we're not talking here about banning it, we're
Right.
talking about controlling it.
That's the proposal here, Tom.
I was just
But if
asking
we
a
push it
question.
off, we're in a situation where every time a proposal comes before us, we have no way of handling it, which is what happened before, so.
So you have to be seated in these things. It's not like you can just, it's not a stand-up thing.
No dancing, no cabaret.
I mean,
Bungee jumping.
I agree with what's been said by almost everybody, that by requiring only paper or plastic ware, you really diminish the ability to have it be a fine dining establishment, and you've already said it shouldn't be a bar and a hangout. So I'm really in favor of having nice stemware for wine and
Remember,
ceramic plates.
there's a 42-inch, 3.5-foot barrier of some form at the edge of this roof, right? And everybody's got to be 3 feet back from it. So,
Just while I'm getting the consensus, before we open it up to the public, I'm sure that a lot of comments are going to be on that same topic, but let me just get the consensus of the board as I use my pen and make these changes. I think the heating element is going to be covered by number 12 on the federal, state, and village law for fire prevention and building construction. structure code. By the way, that is not in here, but in that, one of those elements is that it's gonna require 2 means of egress generally based upon the size of your square footage. And that's not something that the village or the chief building inspector has the ability to waive, that's the International Code Council. So that's not something we're gonna be able to change. But on number 8, just to get the consensus, that glass or ceramic utensils would be permitted, but not beer bottles. Is that kind of the concern?
Bottles, yeah.
Yeah, that was the concern.
What about wine bottles?
Well, what would you want here? Champagne,
You can't because you order a bottle of wine and, I mean, you go to barbecue, you get a beer, they bring the bottle, they bring the glass, they pour it, especially there's some bigger sizes now, 20 ounce.
We could make it grungy dining.
I think what I'm hearing here, if you're gonna make it, if you're gonna allow rooftop dining,
Make it nice.
if you wanna make it nice and you wanna make it attractive for people to participate.
Delete 8 entirely? Okay.
Anybody who throws a bottle off the roof gets a $5,000 fine
There we go.
Well, they're gonna have some major criminal problems.
and a year in jail. That two egress is gonna be very challenging.
Yes,
Well, 2 egresses meaning 1 egress from the restaurant
correct.
up and 1 egress as a fire escape in the back.
Yep.
So it's really 1.
Well, yeah, there'll be one there already.
Yeah.
Well, maybe not,
Yeah.
because they may have to pull one in and just get up to the roof, you know? It needs to be a walkable, they gotta be handicapped accessible.
No, it doesn't.
Sorry,
I don't think so. As long as, you know, it doesn't have to be handicapped accessible.
The only laws that I've seen on other laws is number 7, where all service was made from inside the establishment. Generally, sometimes they put in by staff, so people can't, but you leave that open-ended, meaning waiters and waitress service.
I think it's, you know, it could pose a burden to a restaurant for the waiters and waitresses to keep running downstairs every time they need a drink. Like if you could establish it as what's called a service bar, is that what you meant?
Yeah, no service bars upstairs.
Oh, because I was gonna say a service bar means only the staff can access it for table service, not that people can hang out around it. Because, I mean, I'm waitress,